Okay, thank you. How you doing? How are you doing? All right.
How are you doing?
I'm well. Happy. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a few stories. Here's the first one. A few years ago, our team was invited to collaborate in an urban laboratory in New York City by the Guggenheim Museum. They had quite a bit of money, so that meant that we could throw a bunch of parties. At one of these parties, we pulled people randomly out of the crowd, and we asked them if we could take their picture. But once we had them cornered, then we introduced a twist. We told them that we would pair them up with another victim, and we told them that we're going to get their picture taken together. But first, they needed to introduce each other and share something that had made them happy in the previous week. And then they had to pose for a picture as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other in years. So at first, people were a little bit shy, but then they really get into it. There's a lot of hugging going on. Okay, so by now you're probably wondering, why am I telling you this story? But see, a happy city, we spend a lot of time thinking, how is it that we can build happier places? So we looked at, first of all, what you need to do is figure out what are the elements of happiness, what makes people happy. So we've looked at evidence from public health, neuroscience, behavioral economics, and the conclusion is this: we need more beer. No. The single most important ingredient of happiness is social connections. So social relationships really matter. So consider this. Here's my family in Mexico City. We love nothing more than an opportunity to get together and have a big party. See the guy over there with the beard? That's my dad. Could he look any happier? Okay, so it's not just the beers and the tacos and the laughter. The quality of social connections really matter. People who are socially connected are less likely to experience colds, heart attacks, depression, and even cancer. People who are connected sleep better at night, they're more productive, and they live longer, up to 15 years longer than people who are isolated. So the quality of social connections really matters. And if we want to build cities that are healthy, happy, then we should really worry about the quality of social relationships. But guess what? We have found in our own research that various elements of the city, like the streets, the sidewalks, and the buildings, affect the quality of social relationships. These elements can bring people together or push them apart. Now, there's a bunch of scientists in the room, and a lot of scientists really do fascinating research on these issues. But the problem is that those kind of research and that kind of studies really touch and reach the people who actually plan and build cities. So we've taken cues from these studies and started conducting our own experiments. And these experiments are meant to give participants a visceral understanding of the science behind them. So I'm just going to give you a couple of quick examples of those experiments. Back at the Guggenheim, we pulled more victims or volunteers from the crowds at these parties, and we exposed them to two very different environments for about 8 minutes. On one side, we had people immersed in a savanna landscape, and they were listening to sounds of birds and creeks, so it's like a nature immersion. On the other side, people were immersed in a brutal urban jungle, and they were being serenaded by sounds of traffic, sirens, and jackhammers. When the time was up, then we thanked them for participating, and then we asked them if they wanted to donate to a good cause. And you can probably see where this is going. The people that were basking in nature were far more generous than the people that were stuck in the urban jungle. See, being exposed to nature doesn't just make us feel good. It actually makes us nicer with each other. Nature. So what this means is that we need to infuse more doses of nature into our urban experience. We need opportunities to hang out in nature, to garden together. We need opportunities to see it, to smell it, and touch it. And even micro glimpses of nature help. Here's another experiment we've done. Also in New York, we created this tour through the Lower East Side of Manhattan. So here, we rate people with skin-conducting cuts, which measure their level of arousal. And not sexual arousal, but their level of excitement as they were walking through the street. We also gave them phones where they could punch in their various happiness levels as they walked through the tour. So we learned a lot through this experiment. And this is one of the lessons that we learned. That people were much happier in this kind of environment, a messy street with lots of shops, bars, and activities, than they were here. And this sleek glass facade of a new health food store. What was the difference? Well, this place was active. There's lots going on. This place was dead. It only had doors at either end of the block. So we know from research that people tend to walk faster in these kinds of environments. These places are less social, they're less safe. So we know that contact among strangers, the public contact among strangers on the street really matters. Elizabeth Dunn, which is a psychologist at UBC, has found that even eye contact with strangers or just a casual contact on the street makes people just as happy at the end of the day as their interaction with close friends and family. So the quality of social connections really matters. So remember that we forced people into intimacy, perfect strangers, and we got them to be all nice with each other. Okay, so this is why we did this, and this is why this experiment matters. We had asked them a standard social trust question that you use in research. And okay, well, keep in mind that trust is a function of positive social relationships, positive social interactions. And the question was like this. Hey, Matt. What do you think are the chances if on your way home you drop your wallet or your purse and a stranger found it? What do you think are the chances that you would get it back? Pretty good. See, the people that participated in the experiment had, there was like a trust response. It's just like this superficial interaction with the stranger in that moment of intimacy generated this trust response among them. And we had done a survey with everybody at the party, our test subjects, the people that participated in the experiment, and our control group. And okay, the control group was all the other drunk people at the party. But But yeah, that moment of intimacy, people were more likely to trust just about everybody else in the entire city, just by this experience of intimacy. So, some people think that it may be stupid to trust strangers, but most people are wrong. People could be trusted. In surveys, people will often answer that there's about a 25% chance that they will get their wallet back if a stranger finds it. But look at what happened when a whole bunch of wallets were scattered around ugly, mean Toronto. Well, Torontians are nice. About 80% of wallets were returned. So that means that we can trust people a lot more than we think. And okay, I'm not suggesting that we go out and start hugging strangers in the street, although we're certainly not opposed to that. But there's a mountain of evidence that shows that design influences the way that we treat and regard each other. Now, the really cool thing is that we can design trust-building encounters into our cities. And it also means that we should demand that planners, architects, and developers start thinking about the emotional impacts of urban design. And if they do, and if we do, then we can start building cities that are healthier, happier, richer, and more connected. Cities that draw the best in us rather than push us apart. So I hope that we can talk about how we can build these kinds of cities together. Thank you. Questions? Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of thought put into the urban design of the city. Yet recently, I think a few months back, it was rated as one of the unhappiest cities in Canada.
Yeah.
So, do you know why? What can be done?
Please repeat the question for people over there.
Yeah, so the question is that Vancouver has all these great elements of what we think is a happy city in terms of access to nature and, active streets and all these kinds of environments, and yet there's a great deal of social disconnection in Vancouver. And there are many elements that affect sociability in a city and just happiness in general. Obviously, income matters. Gender, the place where you live, the kind of friends that you have. One thing that I'll say about the social disconnection in Vancouver is that because it's such an expensive city, there's quite a transient community. People come and go often. And if we think that the most important element of happiness is the strength of those social relationships, then if people are coming and going, then there's not an opportunity to have those deep, long roots with your people, So, yeah, I would encourage people to just invest in their friends. And Vancouver, in a way, is very hobby-based.